Hello, friends, and thank you for joining me on the Finding Elevation podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Thompson. I am a mountaineer. I've coached hundreds of aspiring mountain athletes to reach their goals. I also am the author of the book, Finding Elevation, Fear and Courage on the World's Most Dangerous Mountain. And I am super passionate about learning and growing through adventurous pursuits. That's why this podcast is dedicated to encouraging, uplifting, inspiring, and educating people like yourself who aspire to elevate their lives through the outdoors. So let's get into it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Finding Elevation podcast. It is summit season here in the US and in the Northern Hemisphere, which means that there are a whole lot of summits happening all over the place. I think this month I have 30 athletes that are attempting summits somewhere, mostly in the US, but some in Europe as well. And anyway, so that's fantastic, right? It's the thing you've worked for months, maybe longer. You've accomplished your goal. And now what? And so this podcast is dedicated to what you do after the summit, after this big event. Even if you didn't stand on the summit or not, you just experienced this very peak moment in your life. And very often after that happens, athletes of all disciplines experience what's called the letdown effect. So it's actually a thing. And I wanted to focus this episode of the Finding Elevation podcast on the letdown effect in hopes of giving you some tools to work through it or even to think about it preemptively before it happens, because it really is a real thing and something that I certainly was not aware of. I think the first time I experienced it was after I summited Denali in 2012. That was the summertime. I came home. I was at the lake with friends who were talking about the normal things we would always talk about. And I remember lying there thinking, all of this seems so unimportant to me. And I found myself lacking motivation at work, in the rest of my life. Nothing just seemed quite as exciting as what I had been through. And after some summits, I think maybe the bigger the summit, the more of a letdown there is. That would make sense. I even remember there were like physical symptoms, like my hair started falling out after I summited K2. So this is a real thing. And I don't think it's very commonly spoken about or addressed. And I think that it's important that we all are prepared for it and have some tools to get through it. So letdown effect, what is that? What am I talking about? So it's this phenomenon that happens after some peak experience in your life, where regardless of whether you achieve your definition of success in that experience, in this case, a climb, you then afterward experience this sort of decline, sort of in just general physical and mental well-being. And it can include symptoms like apathy, like just very deep fatigue. I've talked with athletes who've come back and then they were sick after they got home, even though they were 100% healthy on the mountain. Just general malaise, I would think. And the way that I remember describing it is that nothing in my real world seemed quite as interesting or exciting as what I had just experienced. And I think that, that there's the cause is that you've had this amazing experience and nothing else seems quite as exciting. I think there are a few reasons why that happens. And this is purely my observation, but part of it is that you no longer have a routine to follow. And if you've been training for months or longer, you've had every day some sort of physical activity, training, exercise, climbing that you needed to do in order to prepare for this big event. And if you're working with a coach, you also had this partnership and the accountability that comes with that. And that has now ended. So I think that lack of routine is a contributing factor. You also, during your climb, and certainly the longer and bigger the climb is, the more pronounced this will be. But even if it's a couple days in the Cascades, you develop a bond with the people that you are with. They become your family, right? Your world, if you're like, I'm thinking about Himalayan climbs, your world is those 8 or 10 people that you're on the mountain with for 2 months. And that becomes everything to you. And then that's disrupted, right? The climb is complete, the trip is over, you go home, and you now have this feeling, I think, of loss for not being a part of that team that you are a part of, every day interacting with. And I think it can also leave you feeling a bit unsupported. So those, in my view, are the two of the things that contribute to this feeling of malaise that happens after a big event. I always debrief alpine athletics athletes after their climbs. And I've also heard repeatedly from them, and I've experienced this myself, that no one understands what they just experienced. And I think that also contributes, that, your partner, your closest friends don't have any idea, even though they love and support and maybe, followed along and studied the mountain, they don't really know what it's like. And it can feel very isolating not to have someone that you can talk to sort of process and debrief everything you've had. So everything you've been through. So those are, as I said, in my experience, some of the factors that lead to this feeling of loss or letdown. Now, what do you do about it? So I think first, recognize and give yourself some grace, because it is absolutely normal to feel that way. 100% normal to feel that way. And I will also say, my disclaimer here is that if your symptoms are signs of depression, please work with a licensed therapist. What is to follow are just my general guidelines and things that I've learned and researched on my own. Not medical advice, certainly not meant to treat a clinical problem. So my advice then is to first take a break, recognize that it's normal. You're feeling this way is absolutely normal. And just take a breath, take a break, let yourself relax, and give yourself the permission. I'll give you the permission to rest if that's what your body needs. And as athletes, and I would say as climbers, we're always thinking about the next goal. We're very hard on ourselves if we miss a workout, and it's hard to just relax. So give yourself the permission to do that now after this big event. And then take care of yourself. And that comes in many forms, but physically, the easiest way is to just focus on good nutrition. You may have lost some weight through the course of your climb. And so coming back home and eating, good protein, the right mix of macros, lots of veggies will help you not only gain that weight back in a good way, but also just help and support your body and your mental fitness as well. So focus on that, and particularly on protein if you're trying to regain some of the weight that you lost. And then this is all the basic stuff that we all know, but it's sometimes hard to do. Sleep. I have come home from expeditions and slept for days, and it's okay to do that. Your body needs time to recover from all of that you've just asked it to do for the last 2 days to 2 months. So listen to your body. Please take a nap if that's what you need, if that's what your body is craving. Recognize that you've just performed at a very high level and your body needs time to recover. I read an article, I don't know if I can find it to link it, but there was a study or studies to understand how long it takes us to recover from the stress of being at elevation. And it's on the scale of months. So I want to say 3 months was the amount of time that climbers needed to really get back to their normal baseline, to rebuild the damage and the stress that they had incurred while they were climbing. So take the time to rest and recover and listen to your body if that's what it needs. I'm also a fan, movement. I get cranky if I don't have movement in my life. So I will say also to do the things that you love: walking, kayaking, yoga, easy trail runs, things like that just sort of also aid in the physical recovery that you need at this point in your life. And do those things that maybe you didn't have time to do when you were training because you had all this other stuff supporting your goals that you needed to focus on physically. Now is the time to do those fun things that you really enjoy and get a lot out of. So those are some physical, again, nothing earth-shattering here, just basically take care of yourself. Then to me, there's the psychological part sort of the emotional and mental recovery that you have to go through after you've had this peak event and you're feeling a little bit down as a result of it. One thing that was always very important to me is to protect your story. You go back to the office, let's say, or back to your church, and everyone wants to know how it went, of course, because they're supportive and curious. And I found that I didn't always want to share exactly, I would, of course, provide a high level update about what happened, but I didn't always want to go into the details with everybody. And so know that that's okay. Just to say to someone, it was really good. Great experience. It's good to be home. Thank you for your support. I don't think you have to go into all the details about whether or not you summited and what each day was like. That's your experience and your story, and you get to decide who you want to share that with. So that's my number one in terms of sort of mental and emotional recovery. And then there's some other tools that have been very helpful for me and for athletes that I've worked with. Journaling or even making videos, if that's easier for you, are really good ways to reflect on what just happened and your experience and to think through what it meant to you. Journaling, to me, is a great way to process all of those thoughts and emotions that otherwise can get a little stuck in me, I think, and then they don't always come out in the best way if I haven't sat down and journaled and very intentionally thought about processing them. And very often journaling will bring up, if you're continuing to climb, will bring up things that you could do differently or better or work on for your next climb. So it can also be a very good way to start to think about that. Although I wouldn't necessarily put that pressure on yourself. Journaling to me should just be about free flow writing and getting out those emotions and starting to process them. I think staying connected within whatever your climbing community is, whether that is the climbers you were just on the mountain with or a group that you regularly train with, that kind of support can be super important. And that community very likely will have a stronger sense of what you have just experienced and why you might be feeling a little blue as a result of this climb or this adventure just wrapping up. I'm, as you know, a huge fan of mindfulness and meditation and just, I know it's hard. It took me years before I really got into it, but just taking, 5 minutes at the beginning of your day to sit in quiet and let whatever thoughts need to process or come to the surface, let that happen. Letting that happen is a great way to process as well. And also just to, I think, stay very mentally fit and put yourself in a solid, peaceful frame of mind for the rest of the day. And then this last one, I know I read about it in an article about letdown, which for me felt very self-validating. I think it has to be done mindfully, and that is to plan your next adventure. And I am, very guilty of planning my next adventure, my next climb before I've even finished the current one. And athletes that I work with have, a list of mountains that they want to climb for the next 3 or 5 years. So I get that that's our process. It's sort of how we think as people who are, want to adventure and have a strong sense of achievement in the mountains. However, my caveat with that is that you can often forget or forego processing what just happened by putting all of your energy on the next thing. And so I list this step last because I think that it should be done last. It should be done after you've had time to process and think and share what you want to share and get yourself back on track mentally and physically. And then I think planning whatever your next goal is in the mountains or in life can be a way to help you get through if you're still having some feelings of letdown. We get sort of these steps and, they're not necessarily linear, but as I've coached athletes and myself climbed, they've helped me to understand what's going on, why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling, and also to process that. And I think then be much more strong for the next adventure, whatever the next goal of mine is.
So I hope they'll be helpful to you. Please take what works and let go of what doesn't, and shoot me a message too if you have questions, or you tried something completely different that was helpful for you. I think it's important that we all share and support one another, especially when we're going through things that are, unexpected, or when we're not feeling 100%. Thanks.
Thank you for listening all the way to the end. If nothing else, you can say that you completed one thing today. All of the resources, products, and guest information that we shared can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out. You can also find out more about me and what I'm up to at lisaclimbs.com and at alpineathletics.net. And if you enjoyed this show, please subscribe and share it with a friend. Cheers!